Hello you guys, welcome back to my channel. It is time for another interview chat video. It feels weird calling them interviews because they're not really interviews. It's more of a chat or a conversation with somebody. And this guest is such an absolute sweetheart. You guys know The Last of Us hit me pretty hard. Hit me hard in the emotions. I got to chat to Cynthia Summers a few months ago, who's the costume designer for The Last of Us, and she was such a wonderful person who spoke so highly of the team, the cast and crew around The Last of Us. So I thought that I would reach out to Jeffrey Pierce to ask if he'd be down to chat, and he said yes. Would you believe it? Like I've said before, the show absolutely, it was such a beautiful, beautiful work of art. And I loved the game back in the day. I played the game years ago. So getting to talk to somebody that was so heavily involved in both aspects of The Last of Us was crazy. Again, such a lovely guy, so gracious with his time. I love doing these styles of videos. You guys know this. I'm a very chatty person. So I love these type of videos because if I love something, I love it with my soul. I don't know how to be a casual fan of something, unfortunately. The whole body of tattoos of things that I have loved over my life is a testament to that. So I love getting to talk to people who were part of my favourite things. And I love hearing them speak, you know, and getting to hear their personal takes on things, their background, where they came from, how they got into the line of work they did. It fascinates me. So yeah, again, big thank you to Jeffrey for sitting down and talking. And here is my chat with Jeffrey Pierce. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm grand, I'm grand. It's been kind of miserable here today, so we are praying to whoever will listen that the weather doesn't affect the call or the internet connection. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to sit down and have a chat. It's awesome to be finally talking to you. We'll get into that in a minute, but I have a long history with this very little game, very unknown game, The Last of Us. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of indie, kind of under the radar.
I've heard it, but yeah, I don't know much about it.
Yeah, well, we'll be getting into all that. But before we do, your line of work, you've such a varied past when it comes to film, TV, you know, games, in the creative fields and stuff like that. It's hard to get into that kind of line of work. So I just
Hmm.
wanted to know, with all of that, when did you know, yeah, this is for me, and decide to pursue a career?
Boy, I knew young. I mean, I knew I couldn't imagine doing anything else after the first time I did a play. I did a sixth grade. I did a sort of shortened version of Comedy of Errors. Had a great math teacher who loved Shakespeare and
Right.
did a play at the end of every year. And up until then, I thought, well, I don't know. I want to be Harrison Ford when I grow up, but that doesn't seem, I can't imagine a path to that. Um, and then did my first play, and once the bit was in my teeth, that's all that I wanted to do. Figuring out how to make that actually happen took a long time after that.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
but despite all my sort of uh, stupid and risky behavior as a teenager, knowing what I wanted to do on the other side of it kept me on a path, at least.
And did you have supportive parents, supportive family around you? Were they on board? Because I know with the arts and any kind of creative job, it can be kind of hard trying to convince your family in particular that that's gonna work.
I yeah, they were supportive. My mom, I don't think either of them had any experience in the arts, but they were both open to my brother's a photographer. They were both open to that as a path. Maybe it was their naivete about what the sort of journey would take. But they were both supportive, and especially when sort of things started to grow, it made it much easier for them to believe. My mom in particular, and I wish I had not been such a stubborn teenager, because I remember being probably in seventh or eighth grade. My mom was like, if you want to be an actor, you should take singing lessons, you should take dancing lessons, you should like do these things. I was like, no, mom. And in retrospect, yeah, it would have been helpful to take singing and dancing lessons, because the instrument that you create when you're young is the instrument that you're going to hold on to as you get older.
Mm.
I was very just out of dumb luck, lucky to fall into places like Shakespeare and Company, which is this great repertory theater, but also it's a world-class voice, body, movement, stage combat training facility. They do these incredible workshops in the winter and the summer, and I'm lucked into sort of finding my path there. And that's where all the tools that I use, especially in video games, but certainly in TV and film too, were honed. Yeah, it's boy, what a ride it's been. It's crazy.
It's interesting. Because I've done a good few chats like this with a wide variety of people, but most specifically with actors. 9 times out of 10, theater is brought up.
Mm.
Be it that's how you got your start, or that you went back and you started doing it. So it's an interesting little thing that keeps popping up. But in
Well,
terms of, sorry.
it's an interesting thing when I meet actors who didn't start out in theater or didn't do plays even like in high school.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not sure what the addiction to acting is for them.
Yeah.
Because for me, the sort of process of being part of a community, the process of genuine interaction, and then that being coupled with an audience is where, as an actor, you just get high from that experience. So
Mm.
the sort of like, it surprises me when people haven't taken that road or haven't explored it as they've sort of gotten into acting in TV and film to see what the appeal is there. There's no money in it, but boy, it's probably I don't know. It's interesting. I miss it terribly, but it is a you have to predicate your life on that lifestyle, which is not one where you're guaranteed that you're going to make any money at any point.
Mm.
Uh, but then again, some of the most wonderful years of my life were spent doing that.
And would you not consider even going back for a play or two? You said that you miss it.
I want to. My hope is that I can carve out 6 weeks this coming summer to go do my first play in a long time. Because if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So that's on this year's radar.
That'll be brilliant. I
Oh
think
yeah.
I think it's the fear though of instant feedback for a lot of people because when I was in school, we it was something similar to what you said where I don't think it was end of year. I think it was a Christmas play every single year. And then in
Mm,
fourth year of school, which in Ireland is called transition year, which is basically you've just finished big exams and you're just about to go into another lot of big exams. So you have a year in between where like you go on trips, you do a lot of plays, a lot of artwork. And
mm,
I have always been interested in filmmaking, film, TV, everything about it, acting, producing, directing. So when the
yeah.
play came up, I was like, sign me the fuck up, I'm in. I want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Got a role in the play, and then decided, oh no, I don't want anyone looking at me. Actually, I'm okay. Give it to somebody else. So I think it's the daunting aspect for a lot of people if you don't start out that way, that it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is an intense experience, I think, for anybody. I think that I meet young actors and they ask, how can I become an actor? I'm like, well, look, if you want to be an actor, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it is repertory theater or community theater or children's theater that you're working at. It doesn't matter, a paycheck doesn't make you an actor. You can do something else for a living and you can be a full-time actor when you're not at work. Use sort of like your day job to finance that. But that doesn't, being on TV, being in film, being in video games, that doesn't make you an actor or not make you an actor. You either are or you're not. And I would say that just in a sort of like in a small way, the impact that an actor can have within a smaller community is more profound than necessarily what you can do on a big stage. Ultimately, money and fame most of the time get in the way of art. And for me, The Last of Us is one of the absolute exceptions to that, where the art is in the front seat and everything else that comes with it comes along for the ride. Um, it's why it has been, the joy and the gift that keeps giving for me as an artist is because there's no place where Neil or Naughty Dog is thinking, how can we make money off this? They're thinking, how can we make the best art, tell the most important stories that we can on the biggest stage possible? And then that translates into what they're doing at HBO too. It's really a rare, rare beast.
I would say that I don't think anyone knew that it was going to be as big and as huge as it was back just before the game was released. But at the same time, it is something that's so special. I feel like you had to have known, you know what I mean, that you'd struck gold.
Yeah, I mean, that was my feeling on set, but then there's a million miles between set and the final product. And it really is the shepherding that they did with the work that Neil wrote and then directed, and then everything that happened in post supported that. Um, oftentimes, and it's not an indie studio. It's not like a low budget studio where there's not a lot of risk. They're putting finances behind it to do it as well as they can. Um, Oftentimes in those situations, you've got a boardroom that comes in and like, no, cut those scenes because we think they should be cut. We'll save a little money. And now it's sort of that's my imprint on the game. And that's not what happens at Naughty Dog, and that's not what Sony does to Naughty Dog or most of their studios, as far as I know. They really allow the creative people that they've hired to create, and that's why it becomes undistilled. It really is a pure piece coming out, which is yeah, it's rare because most of the people on the studio sides they're there to make money, not to make art.
That's the fine line you walk with art, though. It's the same with musicians, anything like that, that there's that division between people who are in it genuinely because of the love, and then,
Mm.
like you said, the financial aspect. Um, but while we're on The Last of Us, we'll stick with the game for a beat. So this game, when it came out, I mean, I can't remember if I played it by myself first or not, but my first memory with the game is my brother. He was too young at the time. I want to say he was 9, 10. And my mother came to me and was like, listen, it's like this. Here's the game. Sit down and play it for him, but let him watch you. So he was sitting beside me on my bed with a little cushion in his lap. And anytime something too gory or too scary, or anytime he caught the faint distant sound of a clicker, the cushion would just come up in front of him and he'd go, tell me when I can look. So I just have such special memories with this game.
Yeah.
But of course, you do too.
Yeah.
With the, I know you did voice acting, but you also did motion capture.
Yeah.
When someone says motion capture to me, I just picture Andy Serkis in like a full morph suit.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's where we work. The exact same technology. The first game, we did it without dots, but they captured our performances on camera. What I mean by they're like facial dots, where they sort of like they mark all the lines and they do all the sort of details. They hand painted all of our performances into the game for the PlayStation 3 version, um, which is I can't imagine how arduous a process that is because they're watching video to see our performances and then bringing that into the characters. But it was just sort of like a Naughty Dog staple, I believe, to sort of like hand do all the stuff for Uncharted, and it was, but they captured it beautifully. But yeah, that's the process. I mean, the dots on the suits, and then now, with part two, the camera rigs on the face, so they really capture every detail. Um, yeah, it's an interesting process. And back to theater, it puts you in the world of pure imagination. You cannot rely on the fact that your partner's wearing perfect wardrobe or carrying an actual, replica gun. You're working with plastics that have weight, and you're working with,
Yeah.
basically scuba suits with dots on them. So you're really forced to commit to the acting of it the same way you would when you're doing a play when you're in sixth grade.
Does it throw you a little bit though? Like, is it difficult to get into the zone with something like that?
No, because everything's imagination at that point. You're not relying on sort of like the sets and everything. And when you're on a set, it's filled with cameramen and grips and extras and,
True. Yeah.
monitors and lights. And so you're sort of like having to sort of avoid engagement with those things, and that takes imagination too. So it is. I mean, I could see how it might be distracting, but I've never found it distracting. I find it liberating as much as anything else.
Well, you work a lot with games and you've done it a good few times, so I'd say you're well used to it at this stage.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yeah.
But like with voice acting, I know there's different ways that you can do it. I mean, some people record at home, some people go into booths, but for you, is it a case of like, are you doing it alone? Do you have audio from maybe other people's lines that you can feed off of, or is it just literally read from the script and like you said, make believe?
Well, they capture most of the audio now on the stage. So the stuff that we do for the most part in the booth afterwards is either stuff that's going over cinematics that they didn't capture. Like in part two, the entire sniper training session with Ellie, uh, we did that in the booth entirely. And I think that, yeah, Ellie and Troy were there with me on that day. So we got to play together in the booth. A lot of times, they can't make the availability at the same time. So you pop in and just sort of like do your work, or you're sort of, maybe there was a flub, maybe there's a small adjustment to your line that they caught on the day on the stage, and you're correcting that. But yeah, I find Neil's writing really it's not flowery, it's not it's not, what am I looking for, it just connects for me. I find that the writing that he did for Tommy just hits. I read it the first time, I'm like, I can't do this wrong, and that's a rare feeling as an actor. And there's just like a level of truth to it and simplicity, and so it's amazing to me. Like, I'll watch the game, or we'll be, or earlier, like in the booth, and I'm right back on the stage with Troy and Ashley, and like it's like no time has passed. And it's such a sort of a brief period of time, but they're so I don't know, those moments are seared in my memory.
I can imagine so. I mean, the game there's very few games like that really do tug at the heartstrings. Like you said, that the writing is so well done, or it's so
Mm.
believable that you almost forget as you're playing it that it's a game. It almost plays like a movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It is just stunning. It's stunning to watch, stunning to play. I plan on replaying it again soon. I want to do a full replay of all of them again soon. Um, but with the show then, I mean, there was a big period of time between the release of The Last of Us and then the show. I mean, for
Mm.
me, when I heard it was being made into a show, I was like, I mean, okay, I love TV. I love TV. It is my absolute life, as you may be able to tell. I'm a bit of a fan. So I was like, okay, like I'm gonna like it, but I don't know. I just had so many memories and like special feelings for the game that I was a little bit hesitant, and then it aired. And then it took over my fucking life. I mean, week in, week out, all I cared about was waiting for the next episode, hopping online, talking to people about it.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how fast I became invested. But for
Mm.
you, I mean, what were some of the initial thoughts? I mean, coming back to that world, just the change from game to TV screen.
Well, it went through different iterations in terms of, I think Sony always knew they wanted to find a way to do it. It was briefly a film, and then that fell apart for good reasons. Um, and then sort of like drifted through different sort of studios expressing interest, and Neil taking meetings. And then finally, Craig Mazin, who had just won a billion Emmys for Chernobyl,
Mm.
and is a huge gamer, told HBO, I want to make this. And he and Neil met, and I remember hearing that he was on board, and I had just seen Chernobyl, and I was like, it's perfect. It is perfect because Chernobyl is a horror. And
Yeah.
in many ways, The Last of Us is a horror too, but it's so much more complex than, shelving it into a genre place. Um, the writing in Chernobyl was perfect, and the performances were perfect. And so for me, as soon as I saw the two of their names together in the trades, I was like, there it is. This is going to be brilliant. And and it is. It's so good. There's so little to really like put it on a pedestal besides, especially in genre. And I say that as an audience member, not as a participant.
Yeah, no bias there. But you can't deny. I mean, like the game, obviously, yes, huge cultural impact, but for the same story to come along and make such a huge impact again, but in a different medium. I mean, I can't think of anything else that did the same thing, that kind of burst onto the scene and grabbed everyone's attention twice.
Yeah, no, I think there are a lot of people who are shocked when they find out that it's a game, after they've watched it on HBO. And so it's amazing to see it resonate across the sort of culture like that. It would have been terrible if it had been awful.
Yeah, that was my fear as well. I was like, I'm gonna love it because look, it's HBO. There was a lot of really talented names connected to it, but I was like, what if it's shit?
Yeah,
What's that
yeah.
fear?
I, I, I mean, I trust Neil implicitly, and he sent me a couple of scripts early on, and I was just like, "Holy shit! These are some of the." I read a lot of scripts, and these are like the two best scripts I've ever read. I was like, "This." I read the pilot, and I read episode 4. I was like, "This is amazing, amazing stuff." And the sort of wherever it diverted from the game was just as good as what was in the game. So yeah, I felt good about it. Because if you don't look, a lot of times where I'm at as an actor, I'll get a script and think, okay, how the fuck do I make this work? I have to make choices to make the writing work. Um, and it's just part of the beast because
Mm.
you're not going to get Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann 9 times out of 10. Um, but to be able to read a piece, whether it was part 1 or part 2 or the scripts for 4 and 5, I was like, I know how to make all of this come to life. Um, it's a rare, rare thing. But again, because everybody's chasing money, they want to make something that's going to make money.
Mm.
Uh, Craig and Neil want to make art, and if you that's the thing. If you make art and your purpose is to make it great, then you're going to make money. You're going to find your audience. But I think that there is a misunderstanding on the other side of the table. They're like, want to reverse engineer it. How do we copy Barbie? How do we make another Barbie? Like, well, you can't. That's impossible. Um, but they'll try. How do we make another Avengers movie? How do we copy Iron Man's success? You're like, well, you can't. It's just going to just, get worse and worse as you go.
I think the audience isn't stupid either. You can feel that. You can feel when something's hollow or when something is a copy and paste to some extent.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. You show up for something that's great.
Yeah,
Um, it's hard to name something that's great that hasn't made money.
true. That's a
That's what
happy
I
cycle, though. That is a happy cycle.
It is. It is. That's what, if I were to sit down with executives in general, I would say, okay, I know you want to make money, but let's talk about greatness first. Let's make something great. And have that be our guiding light as opposed to um, here are 10 things that made money. Let's mishmash all them together.
That Mr. Krabs mindset, though, gets in every time. Like many, Mr. Krabs and
Well,
SpongeBob.
it goes back to what you initially asked about, like, were your parents supportive? Um, yeah, they were supportive because they felt like I would find a way no matter what. But that's the mindset of like, well, go be an artist. There are risks that take place with it, as opposed to, well, how are you going to make money doing that?
Mm,
Um, I don't think either I turned off a switch and refused to hear that from them, or they never asked the question. I don't think they ever asked the question. Uh, but as soon as like, but how do we make money off this comes into the conversation, you're no longer making art.
true. And I think it's interesting what you said about the switch in regards to your parents, because with what I do with online, social media, making videos, I had a part-time job when I started this. So I was lucky in that aspect that I did have some sort of stability. Now that crumbled underneath me. I worked at a very small shop in retail and
Mm.
I hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it, but I loved the people that I worked with. It was a very small, independently owned shop, but we closed down. And then I was faced with, well, all right, do I just go into full-time retail somewhere or do I try make a go at this? And I remember saying it to my parents, and my dad was like, I know nothing about that world really. And my mom was kind of hesitant, but she was like, we'll support you no matter what.
Yeah.
And now because they took that risk, it's somewhat paying off. I'm happier probably than I've ever been. But my brother,
Yeah.
a year or two ago, decided he wanted to be in a band. Again, another unconventional job. He comes along and was
Yeah.
like, music has always been his life anyway. But there was no talks of that. There was no pushback of, well, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what are you gonna do kind of deal. They were just like, all right, let's go. So
Yeah.
I think starting from a place of like I said, love and the want to do whatever it is when it comes to art, the arts is so much more important than anything else.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Because if you let yourself, if you don't let yourself get overwhelmed by all of that, no, because you get plenty of no from the industry itself. Um, I remember meeting a lot of young actors when I was starting out, when I'd moved to Los Angeles, whose parents were not supportive, who were
mm,
not excited about it, who asked that question all the time. And it was, I think, soul crushing for them. Um, because you have enough to worry about on your own plate, just getting where you want to be as an artist, and the practical considerations and working the part-time jobs to support what you're after. If the phone calls home are like, how's that waiting tables job?
mm,
Um, there's got to be, you carry that with you. You carry that into rooms when you're trying to get a job. And in some ways, walking into a room and wanting a job is the best way not to get the job. Because then you can't do your art because you're worried about, how am I going to please this motherfucker on the other side of the table? And the truth is, the only person that you have any need to please is yourself. Am I at the level that I can perform at? And if you're thinking about anything else, you're not going to get that job, or you're going to get that job and second guess yourself the whole time because you didn't do your work. So I'm grateful all the time not to have had my journey complicated by people shitting on my dream from home.
I mean, but it's hard though, especially like when you are such a creative force, which you yourself are. I mean, between the acting and you're an author, you've written books. You can sometimes be your own worst enemy as well, your own worst critic.
If you are your own worst critic, then that's okay, because you can get past that. It's the voices in your head that come from parents or unsupportive friends or frenemies or fucking enemies. Those are the voices that are ultimately, I think, more destructive than your own self-critic. Um, I've learned to sort of master my critic by listening to it. Get the fuck up, get to work. What the fuck is wrong with you? Sit down and write. You got to get out 1,000 words today. You have to prepare this audition. That's not good enough. Figure it out. Like, that's where that analytical mind can be really, really helpful, because it can kick your ass when your ass needs kicking. But it has a place, and it has no place in the creative sphere. It can galvanize you, or it can fix the work that you do. Just sort of as a writer, uh, I, found that, you have two hemispheres of the brain, and they communicate with each other when they're both awake. Well, the creative one is the only one that's actually awake when you first get out of bed. So if you can force yourself out of bed and get to writing, or get to, the material that you're prepping or anything before the analytical side wakes up, you can create with pure ease. And so I've found that I sit down and write and just go, force myself to the, you know, put away the phone, have coffee, get on into writing and create. And as soon as I start criticizing what I'm writing, I know that the other side of my brain has awoken and it's time to stop,
Right.
because there's no way to create and criticize at the same time. But then I get another cup of coffee and I come back and I review all the stuff that I created before the critic woke up, and I let the critic do his work. And I fix the problems and find, the solutions that my analytical mind has to put on the structure and on the scenes. And it's very, very helpful. But the two at the same time, that's what writer's block is. It's one voice talking and the other one like, no, that sucks. That's shit. It's terrible. Don't do that.
Just quit.
Yeah. So recognizing that those are voices, within you, that they're part of who you are, but they're not who you are, is sort of been my process creatively, and it's how I, avoid getting too upset when jobs don't happen. Because analytically, I can say, well, there's a million good reasons why I didn't get that job, so on to the next.
Hmm. That's a very healthy mindset. That is being able to separate the two and have them both coexist at once. That is
Hmm.
a skill I didn't even know existed that I would probably be trying to work on.
Well, I sort of do, I tell my daughter, I'm like, look, your thoughts are not who you are. Like, you can think anything. You can think terrible things. They're not indicative of anything but, you know, a thought. You are your actions. So that's sort of the way that I present the world to her. So that when she makes mistakes, as we all do, she knows, like, this is not my character. This is not a revelation of who I am. I'm rotten to the core. It's just like, no, you made a bad choice. You had a cavalcade of choices you could have made, and you picked one that sucks. Everybody does that. But these are just, the voices in our heads. And we don't have to take them any more seriously than they require us to take them. I smoked for a long time, from the time I was 13 till I was 26. And my ability to sort of like, in that moment at 26, to finally be able to quit was realizing that the voice in my head that wanted to have a cigarette, although it sounded like me and was very reasonable and made perfect sense, was not me. And so my ability to separate from that voice, it drove me insane for about 6 weeks. But the decision to say, that's not who I am. That's something exterior. That's, an addiction that has been fed to me by the tobacco companies. Nothing else. Like, nobody's like out there like, well, I just grow tobacco and then I roll it into cigarettes. Like, no, like, they're making billions of dollars off of our addiction to it. And so that separation was huge because I hadn't had an adult emotion without a cigarette attached to it, good, bad, or indifferent. It was all there. The cigarette was always there. And trying to separate sort of that voice from my identity was a huge step. So that's the way I look at the world now. Like, I can have a million different thoughts, but I get to choose what I do. And as long as and it doesn't happen every day. Asked my daughter about this morning. She's like, I owe her an apology because I let my own sort of sense of, Jesus, I'm tired. I want to get done with this script. I didn't sleep well. Got to get this audition on tape, and I have to finish the book before the end of the month. And she's like, Dad, we got band this weekend, and then I have to go to this meeting, and then there's honor band on Saturday morning, and I have to go to Taekwondo demo team, and then D&D on Saturday night. And I'm like, I am going to be a fucking taxi service. And I let that take over my morning. That's not how I feel. I'm happy, take her, drop her off, pick her up, all this shit. It's fine. It's not going to impact my day. But I let those voices run me this morning. So the first thing I'm going to do when she gets home from school is apologize and let her know that I made some bad choices. But that's life. That's how you sort of like avoid the pitfalls of, being at the mercy of the world, because you get to choose your response. Things come in, what you do with them is up to you.
Sometimes the negative goblin wins, sometimes you beat him back with a stick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As long as you're good 9 times out of 10, I think you're good.
But in terms of what were we talking about? We're talking about The Last of Us,
Yeah.
the show. Listen, I'm so easily misled. I can go off on a tangent for hours.
No, it's fun. Fun to ride.
Um, but stepping back into that world after that amount of time, it must have been strange for you. but also stepping back into a character that you weren't previously must have also been strange.
Uh, it it was a very simple choice to know that I was not going to play Tommy in the show. I'm 22 years too old to play Tommy in the show. And I knew when they cast Pedro, they're not gonna like dye my hair and have me play Tommy. And it took, I don't know, 5 seconds to embrace that as the way. Uh, because Neil called and was like, hey man, we want you to read for this one thing. And so I auditioned for one thing, and they're like, we want to offer you 2 episodes with a different character. I was like, well, fuck yeah, let's do that. So I just dove in, and it's great casting for me. And they wouldn't have given it to me if I couldn't be really, really good in the role because of the nature of what it is. Like, uh, uh, I had never met Craig before, and I knew that with the initial audition, but the other part is like, this is not good casting for me, but I'm going to do great work because I need Craig Mazin to believe in me if this is going to happen. Um, and so it was, yeah, there was not a lot of thought in between getting the script and deciding this is, I can make this go. And then showing up was ridiculous. I mean, there were 200 or 300 people on set, and 90% of them grew up as fans of the first game.
Mm.
And so when I walked, onto set the first time, everyone's like, Tommy. It was like I walked into a room with 300 of my closest friends. It was really, really special. Nothing will ever, I think, match that experience because you don't walk onto a TV or film set and have everyone there have grown up around what they're creating.
Mm.
Um, there was so much care and attention to detail and love of the material and support of what we were all doing. I mean, it was, I've never been in an environment like that.
It's funny that you bring up attention to detail and care. That's something that I loved about the show. I got to chat with Cynthia.
No, Cynthia, my,
Oh, I
I
know.
love her so
She is
much.
such a sweetheart. But
Yeah,
like asking her about her process with costuming and stuff, the amount of research and detail and the sheer volume of what they had to have to
yeah,
reproduce or replicate certain outfits was nuts.
yeah,
And I think a big part of Perry's vibe to him is the outfit. It is, he looks the part. He looks exactly like he portrays himself. So for
yeah.
you, what was it like putting on that outfit? What was your favorite part of it? When did you feel like, yes, I'm him?
I well, the first thing that Neil, when they sent me the 2 scripts, he's like, "Stop shaving, don't cut your hair. We'll see you in February." Um, so I had time to sort of like, it was not, there was not a lot of detail in the script about who he was. It was just like, maybe he was in the military, I think was exactly what it said in the script. I was like, well, I'm latching onto that. And so I got to spend all that time in between July and February trying to figure out who he was. And Cynthia and I sent like, oh my God, probably 40 different images of stuff that I thought would be right for him. And and it showed up for the fitting, and she had all of them. Like perfect. I was like, all right, let's see what it's going to be. And we tried on all the stuff that, she had put together, and it was like, it was exceptional. I love her. We worked together a decade and more ago on a show, and she just was lovely and wonderful and so good then. And so like walking back into her fitting room was wonderful personally, and then to sort of get to create that sort of wardrobe that gave me everything that I needed to play the part, between her and props and the armorers. Like I did not have to work. Like once all that stuff is on, you're there, you're in the characters living and breathing within that world. And it was magnificent.
I didn't know that you'd known Cynthia previously. That must have been really weird because there was a lot of the actors from the game as well were on the show and on set. It must have been trippy for you to walk in and see so many familiar faces.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think. None of the gang, Troy was there for a convention. We had dinner and he came to set one day. Um, but nobody else from the game was on set while I was there.
Oh, at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
True, yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was a very, and with COVID and everything, it was a weird experience with like visors and masks and stuff like that. But yeah, it couldn't dent the experience. Even COVID could not kill the experience.
I think with characters, if you're dealing with a character that has a whole arc in a show or on film, how they leave the show or film is just as important as how they come in. And Perry had one hell of an exit, but it was quite heavy. So
Yeah.
what was that like for you being in filming and trying to detangle afterwards?
Um, I mean, I find that there's very, as long as you do, as long as you get your work to where you want it to be, there's not a lot of residual for me, from performance. Um, the, yeah, it is, it's, the things don't linger. They only linger if you didn't do the work you wanted to do, or you didn't do the choice that you wanted to sort of put into the editor's bay. Um, yeah, I just had, I didn't have this sort of mountain of material to sort of like sift through. I had a lot of really specific things that I needed to communicate, and most of them were without any dialogue.
Mm.
So the process for me was really saying, okay, these are the moments that I want to make sure land, that the camera captures them, even though I'm not speaking. And I felt like I had done all those moments. I got to see enough playback to know that they existed. And then I was so grateful that Timothy in the editing bay was able to see them and use them. Um, and so, yeah, I wasn't stuck with any like what if or if only or replaying it, after the fact, or trying, or like an acting teacher who's like, look, you fucked up when you're driving home from the audition and you're still working on the audition. Like you didn't do
Oh.
your work, you didn't leave it behind. Um, and so I really, this was such a wonderful moment and opportunity that I made sure that I did what I needed to do on set, and then it didn't stick with me afterwards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I'm someone who's overcritical of everything that I do in my own life. So like that, driving home from the audition, replaying it. I'd be replaying it, making coffee later. I'd be replaying it, going to sleep. I'd be replaying it a week later. That's just the kind of person I am. But what you said was absolutely true. I think it was perfectly executed in a way that made you feel both like, oh, and also gross. But it's interesting what you said about playing those certain scenes or those little moments where dialogue isn't needed, where a lot of it is expression or a lot of it is body language. The need to fill the silence is there in certain moments. But I think, like you said, just not saying anything is speaking in itself.
Back to the games. I've been back, started back on the remaster, playing the part two remaster, and I don't know. I mean, the sort of like the unseasoned director would be like, it's good, it's good. Let's pick up the pace. Let's cut out the sort of like air.
Mm.
Um, Whereas Neil's trust of our silence, like Troy and I are there, he's got the guitar, and it's a very simple back and forth. He's telling the story, and Tommy's responding to it. And they just, he's so patient. Like he sits with Tommy for that moment as he's processing it, and it works. Like in games, they're like worried that that's not going to work, I think, some of the time. In TV and film, they worry about it too. Like, but life is in the silences. Like that's where things are actually happening for people. And so if we're trying to replicate that, we got to, as actors, find out what that journey is first. Can you do the scene without any dialogue whatsoever? And then put the talking on top of it, because the talking is the top of the iceberg, and everything else that's happening in the scene is unspoken. And can you do that just by feeling it, just by making those choices and not sort of indicating it with your eyebrows or whatever? And
Yeah.
that has been the journey for me as an actor, has really been getting to a place where I'm very comfortable doing that. And maybe it's getting older, like you get like the nice lines and creases that help that expression play through. But also it's becoming more seasoned and trusting in your ability to communicate with very simple choices that have nothing to do with the dialogue. Um, yeah, it's the that's one of the great things about being an artist of any nature, is that you get the opportunity to get better your entire life. If you're an athlete, at some point, you're going to just start getting worse. But an artist, you can always find a way to sharpen those tools.
True, and like you said, with aging as well and growing older, you do kind of settle into yourself more, and you learn who you are, and things do tend to kind of smooth out. I'm still waiting for that for me, but I have heard that is what happens. Uh,
Yeah, it takes it whatever time it takes.
with the games and the shows, the game and the show, and all of the projects that you've worked on. I mean, technology, everything is always advancing. Now, I mean, the internet just has a life of its own, really. Do you like to keep up with what people are saying when you put out a project now? Like, do you like to keep up with reviews, what people are saying? I mean, feedback is instant. Do you like to tap into that and see what's going on, or do you try and keep a distance?
I'm interested in the I'm interested in genuine responses. Um, and I'm, like, I guess there's nothing for me more personal than acting. I'm able to sort of separate from the other stuff. Like I've got a lot of really nice reviews of my books. Like some people love it. A lot of people love it. But then the handful are like, this is terrible. Most of them are responding to the fact that I use the F word frequently. They're like, this is fucking terrible. They said they would use that word. But it's interesting to sort of like try to be objective about criticism and be able to say, okay, I can read this and not have it cut me to the core.
Mm.
Um, and sort of that is, uh, uh, it's an excellent tool to be able to say, you know what, I do my work, and I should be my own worst critic. And if I have pleased myself, I really don't give a fuck about what anybody else thinks. I'm not writing my books for other people. I'm writing them for me, and everyone is invited. That's what I do when I write. Like I'm going to tell the story that I think needs to be told. I'm going to tell it in a way that I would want to hear it, and anybody who wants to can come along for the ride. And anybody who doesn't touch or move in the same way, all that's fine. Doesn't fucking matter. Because what's important is I'm putting out my work to the best of my ability to please myself, to tell the stories that I feel as an artist need to be told.
Mm.
And so as long as I did, you look, I guess I would be more susceptible. I would be more susceptible to being stung by criticism that I felt was valid, that I could have controlled.
Right.
Like it
Yeah.
doesn't seem like he even knows his lines. Like, well, I could have known my lines better.
You're like, damn, you got
Like,
me on that one.
damn it, nailed. Oh, I'm terrible. Um, because it just is. I don't think anybody's going to make a criticism of my work that maybe I haven't already made.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, but I've been lucky with The Last of Us. There's nothing I would change about my performance as Tommy. There's nothing I would change about my performance as Perry, regardless of what anybody in the entire world might say or think or do. Um, and that maybe that's the level of, maybe that's what getting to 52 means. Like, I cannot give a fuck. I cannot give a fuck. Like, say anything you want. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't sting. Um, Yeah, maybe that's being able to sort of like separate really clearly from the inner critic and saying that's not, I don't have to go into agreement with that. I'm glad I'm there. But
I'd
I'm not
love to be there.
sure. It's process.
Yeah.
And I guess you got to take enough arrows to be like, all right, that skin back there is pretty thick now. Got enough scar tissue not to be stung.
I just want to touch on your books very briefly because I have been an avid reader my whole life. That was passed down to me from my mom. She
That's
instilled that
good.
love for reading, used
Good
to read to
mom.
me, my brother, all the time. I took that and ran with it. I got really into audiobooks in 2019, 2020, and then more recently I'm trying to get back into like physical reading because there's something about being able to shut out the world, no phone, no distractions, just a
Mm,
book. I'm
yeah.
currently I'm currently making my way through Interview with a Vampire and Vampire Lestat.
Nice.
But with your books, what was that something that you wanted to do? Was it something you actively always had on the back burner that you were sculpting and molding in some way all along, or is it something that you sat down to do just one day?
I, you know, everybody has their own way into the world of acting. Um, and ironically, my way into Los Angeles, I showed up there as a theater actor who was 25, turning 26, with a SAG card, but like virtually no TV film credits. And that seemed like very old age to arrive there and get started. Maybe it's different now. I don't know. But yeah, so I look back like 26, it's still a child. But everybody else was 26, had long credits. So my way in was to write a script. I wrote this massive World War One script, straight drama. And I did it, while I was waiting tables and going to acting class, I did like a guerrilla campaign to try to get it read. And of like 150 some submissions, I got one phone call, but it was from Miramax Los Angeles. And so, they saw the pitch and some images that I faxed to them in the middle of the night. And the president, Mark Gill, was like, I'd like to read that script. So I took them the script and he read it. And 2 weeks later, we had breakfast and he gave me wonderful notes. And that script got me my first agent. And he eventually became my manager. And that's how everything began for me. Without that script, without that writing, I would have had a very difficult time getting taken seriously as an actor, ironically. And I found that it was much simpler to make a living as an actor than it was to sit down and grind out scripts. So that's what I did for forever. And then I had the idea for what became the books maybe 12, 12, 13 years ago. Um, and at a certain point, I was like, well, this idea is too big to go get made as a $20 million an episode series. I'm not going to be able to have the juice to make that happen. So I'm going to write the books because I have to tell a story. And maybe the books are the way that I can eventually find a way to get it made into a show. Um, and so one of my closest friends, he and I are going to take it out and try to turn it into an animated series and see what we can do from there. So that's been the process. Um, and it really, at a certain point, I just said, well, look, if I'm going to tell the story, I have to tell it. I may not be able to sell it, but I need to get this story told. And that was, the process of, at this point, 4 books ago, because I'm like 10,000 words from the end of book 4 right now. Um,
Shit.
yeah. So
Wow.
it's been the ride. So I got one more book to do after this, and then I can retire from writing.
I don't think that's true. I don't think you will. With writers, especially, I don't think there is any true end to writing. Because you'll go,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's over with this book, but then you'll do it, and then it'll be, but I could do one more where we talk
I,
about.
Yeah, I will I'll wait for the moment to come to tell me that book is in the back of my head.
Mm.
Um, I'm very very, Stephen King talks about writing and says like for him it's just really just transcribing. Like he just like listens to the voice and puts it on paper. And I'm very lucky that that's the way mine works too. Like it's all there. It's just having the will to sit down and let it all sort of come out and then shape it. But yeah, I couldn't just sit down and like, hey, I've got a good, someone comes to me, here's a good idea for a book, go write this. I'm like, I have no fucking idea how to write that. But what I'm writing right now, I do know how to do.
I can't believe it's been that long in the works though. That's what got you your in pretty much way back when, and you just came back and revisited it.
Well, no, because the first one was very much like just a drama about the First World War. There were no supernatural elements to it. There was no sort of like Dante's Inferno aspect to it.
But you just
It was
reworked it.
well, I took the time. I took all the sort of like investigation I'd done about the time period. I mean, I literally woke up one morning and was like, "What if it's a horror? What if it's not? What if I take this time period, which is important to me in terms of like, First World War as an inflection point for humanity. And what if it's a horror? And that sort of spark, took me everywhere I wanted to go with the story so far.
Fascinating. So it like re-inspired you, just that one thought.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had a dream. I had been rereading some source material about the war and went to sleep and had a dream and woke up and I was like, that was terrifying. That's the hook. So that you have to listen to those sort of like little voices and follow them because if you don't, they shut up and stop talking to you.
True. And some of the best works of art have come from dreams, have come from those fleeting thoughts. We were talking earlier a bit about responses and people's response to your work, your art. You've recently you did a few conventions over the last year or two, haven't you?
Yeah. It
How
was
have you
great.
found that? Like getting to see and speak with people face to face.
I mean, with COVID and having never done them before, I had not engaged face to face except randomly with like fans who were like, "You're Tommy in The Last of Us," and those moments like prior to convention were wonderful. Like the dryer repairman would see a T-shirt and be like, "That's a great game." I'm like, "Yeah, it's great." My daughter would be like, "He plays Tommy," and the guy's like, "What the fuck?"
I'd
So
freak
those,
out if I was in that
yeah,
situation. Holy shit.
yeah. So I had like wonderful like one-offs, and the convention sort of came out of nowhere, and the opportunity to talk to people whose cultural sort of like way of looking at the world has been impacted from the time they were 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 by that story and by those games and by the characters and by part one and part two and by Ellie and her place in the world and then her as a gay woman and like all of those things culturally like to be touched by something like that uh, are incredibly powerful. And then to sort of be able to sit there face to face with people who have been open to the world by that story has been phenomenal. I've loved every moment of those conventions. I don't, they pop up when they pop up. And I have adored going and having that opportunity.
It must be lovely, like you said, to get to hear all those stories. But from somebody on the flip side, I can say that the excitement of going like that to meet someone who has been a part of something that has had a huge impact on your life in whatever way, be it the game, the show, whatever, that is so important. It really is getting to meet that person and tell them like, hey man, like thank you for whatever. Um, but yeah, I know that you hadn't done many conventions, but that you had in the last year or two, and I just wondered what that was like for you, kind of being dropped into that.
Yeah,
Um,
it was special. It's weird because you'll see like a handful of actors and they're like jaded about the experience. You're like, okay, then why the fuck are you here? Like, if you're not like coming for this sort of like the joy of like genuine human interaction,
and
uh,
connection.
yeah, what don't go. It like seems like complete, waste of time. Yeah, no, just the Genuine human connection is such a rare experience. And like these fucking phones and electronics, like I'm driving my daughter crazy because I'm like, you got to prove that you can handle it. Otherwise, I'm not putting a smartphone in your hand because I'm not going to have a kid who's like,
Yep.
disengaged from humanity purposefully. Um, so when those moments come, like you have to embrace them. So yeah, that has been, I think, the real yeah, I really have enjoyed those moments. And I say that as mostly a kind of introverted person.
I would say you don't strike me as introverted at all, but I can see what you mean. I'm the same. I'm very not introverted, but more anxious around people. I'm very secure
Hmm.
with who I am as a person, and I'm somewhat loud and outgoing, and I'm chill with who I am. But there is something overwhelming like that about being put into a room with so many people, or like doing something like this. That if you are on the introverted side of things, that it can be a bit challenging.
I guess it's interesting because on set and at work, I am not at all an introvert. Like I'm very much at home within the world of what I do professionally. But on a day-to-day, beat to beat sort of life experience, I'm very comfortable just like hanging out with my dog, doing my thing, reading and writing and like, working in the backyard and like all these sort of things that require my hands and not my mind. Like, um, yeah, that I do find that I probably have a good amount of introvert, maybe 75% introvert within me. Although it doesn't necessarily express when I'm engaging with people in the world, my time alone, I'm very comfortable with.
I can relate to that. I could see where you're coming from with that. Um, I don't want to take up much more of your time because I know I've kept you on long enough. But two more questions.
Sure.
One is just more because of genuine curiosity. As somebody who loves to collect things, I am a lover of stuff and a lover of things. Is there anything that you have kept from a project that you worked on? Could be film, could be a show, could be anything that you were just like, I gotta have it. It has to be mine.
I've got a couple things from early on. Um, I was lucky that my first really big job was unlucky that it didn't go for 7 years. It went 8 episodes instead. But I did a TV series with that David Milch did, a cop show. Ed O'Neill and I were New York detectives, and the cast was like Titus Welliver and Michael Madsen and David Strathairn and Henry Winkler and Carrie Ann Lowell and Kim Dickens. Like it was ridiculous. Glenn Turman and so I still have my NYPD detective ring and badge and coffee mug. I haven't kept a lot of other things just because like you get to the end of something, you're like, well, on to the next, because that's sort of been my place in the world. And on like there's nothing to take home from playing Tommy,
Hmm.
like a marker dot. So I do have like, every piece of uh, uh, every like gift that Naughty Dog has ever sent me around the games is in a nice spot in my office. And a nice reminder that's so instead of like taking stuff from set, like I have those things. Um, yeah. So I don't have any like pure memorabilia except for that stuff from the Big Apple.
How fancy. He says so casually. And oh, I didn't keep anything from set, but Naughty Dog sent me a personal shrine and
They,
got that.
yeah.
With with acting in particular, last question for you. With acting in particular, it is a very personal, it's a very personal experience, it's a very personal process where even if you try not to, bits of yourself do bleed into the role, maybe bits you weren't even aware were there. But what project have you worked on that you feel has resonated most closely to who you are as a person?
It's an interesting thing, and it's something I think about more now than probably I ever have. Um, we are products of our DNA. Um, and the world has changed in really healthy ways in the past 25 years in terms of our desire to put real representation of human beings on TV and film that aren't white men. When I started out, I probably had 100 opportunities for every one that my Black Latino friends had.
Mm.
It didn't mean that I was better at my job or a better artist. And certainly in some cases, I was not as good as they were, um, or as seasoned or skilled. But because of the nature of the industry back then, and for the entirety of the past 100 years, the there was an incredible demand for white males and white male saviors. So you sort of like, that's what you were going to play. You were going to play cops and firemen and heroes and stuff. I was always a little more interested in playing things that worked around the edges of that. And what I find now is that the roles that I want to play, the roles that I'm right for, are much more connected to who I am genetically. Like, uh, I, this is such a complicated way to get this across. I'm trying to simplify it. Um, like my mom's dad was like a a cowboy and a farmer and a dirt farmer and like went from Missouri to Colorado and brought up his seven daughters there while fought in the First World War and came back and worked in a bottling plant. That's who I am. I mean, it's not who I am in terms of like what I've read and I've seen the world and broadened my mind. But my sort of like the roles that I'm right for all live within that very sort of like simple sphere, which is great because I want to play those parts. Um, but it's not, and I don't want, like there's not this sort of like, because of the way the industry has shifted and opened doors that were closed until recently, my sort of like scale of like, okay, this is the palette of things that I can play. I want that to be narrow. I want to play the parts that I should play, and I don't want to take parts away from anybody else who might be better in that role, regardless of who they are. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's a complicated way to say the changes that are happening that people decry as what is this ethnicity and like what, like no, that's the way it ought to be. We need to portray the parts that we're right for, and the parts that I'm right for are the Tommies of the world and the Perrys of the world. And those are the parts that feel the most at home for me. So if I can do nothing but play Tommies and Perrys for the remainder of my career, I'll be very happy for that to be the case because that's what I am born to. That's what, my ancestors have led to. Those are the roles that I should be playing, the stories I should be telling, honest portrayals of those people. Um, so yeah, so I'm very comfortable sort of uh, within that space. I don't know. That's kind of a roundabout way of getting there, but I hope it's clear.
No, it's a beautiful answer. Beautiful answer. And it's so true what you're saying. And I'm so glad you touched on that. The idea of diversity for people of color or LGBTQ plus stories to be told. And you do get that fucking kickback online,
Yeah.
of it's just it's so fucking irritating. And with The Last of Us in particular, that's why it had such a renowned impact on me. I mean, Ellie's story, and then with the show, there was just so many moments like that of just regular fucking storylines being portrayed. There
Mm.
wasn't a straight white man. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And yeah, yeah, I agree. 100%.
It becomes so sort of endemic to the industry to be like, well, you need a white man to who's going to be the white guy who stars in this thing. You're like, it's so good that that's changed. I
Yeah.
remember writing scripts, uh, pilots 15, 20 years ago, they're like, well, look, Asia's never going to buy a thing with a black man as the lead. And I'm like, well, that's who should be playing the lead in this show that I'm writing. So I guess we're not going to sell this thing. Um, yeah, I don't, at a certain point, I think that racism was purposeful. Um, but then at a certain point, it just became habitual for the industry to sell that way, and it seeped into everything. Um, and to see that change within my lifetime is really, really great and really, really healthy. And I can't imagine the small-mindedness to not realize how stupidly lucky uh, it is to be born white and a man. You don't walk around. I never walked around with that perspective of like, well, this is great. This is my world. You just don't know,
Mm.
and that's what the sort of unspoken privilege is. You don't know, and until you can empathize with what other people are going through, just because they weren't born with those stupid random things that mean nothing that you were born with, uh, how can you consider yourself a member of the human race? You got to understand, like, I don't know, the small mindedness behind getting upset about it is a level of insecurity
Mhm.
that I cannot fathom walking around with.
Me neither. And I think when it comes to TV and film, I do think we are very much in the age of representation on screen, of diversity.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's beautiful to see, and it's so important, and I hope that it keeps pushing, that it won't be a topic of debate someday, it'll just be normalized. Like even with like with on topic of sexuality, like with Bill and Frank. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Oh my, that episode fucking destroyed me. Um,
Yeah.
and the response to that episode and to that storyline was majoritively hugely positive. I mean, my
Yeah.
dad started The Last of Us because I nagged him. I was like, Dad, you have to watch it. And he was like, Shut up, I'll watch it. And I remember he told me he was going to watch their episode and he knew nothing. And I was
Mm.
like, okay, yeah, have fun. He came out of the sitting room 2 hours later, red eyes, looking at me, and he was like, Why didn't you fucking tell me? Like, genuinely emotional. And I was like, Yeah,
Yeah.
um,
When
yeah,
it's done that well, art works. When it cuts through, it would take an incredible amount of inherited bigotry to not be touched by that story. It's just so beautifully done. And that's the power of art. And the beauty, like I had a conversation with somebody who was just saying, like there are things to wrestle with. There are things that society needs to wrestle with. And the people who got upset about game two, the beauty of it is the game will always be there for them to come back to at a different point in their life with a different perspective. Um, and experienced in a new way and allow them to finally change. Like the game is going to be there. The story is going to be there for the people who hated it the first time or were angry about it the first time or hurt by like, how could you do this? Like Ellie's gay. What? Um, the beauty of art is that it's going to be there. It's not going to change. And they'll be able to come back to it at a certain point and they can change. I would say this, anybody who gets triggered by these things, like angry about diversity, angry about, uh, uh, you know, Bill and Frank, like it's good that you're triggered. You got to investigate that. Why are you so upset by that? Because it's about you being upset. It's not about the piece of art you just saw. Investigate why you're so fucking angry. And you may become a better human being because of it. That's the purpose of art. We're here to upset people.
absolutely. And it's a fantastic point about that. Just look inward. Hey, man, just look inward. Maybe sit down and talk with yourself. Why does it bother you so much?
Yeah.
But I do reaction videos. That's what I do on YouTube. So basically, I'd sit like this, watch the episode first time. I tend to stay away from trailers. I stay away from anything that could spoil me. Um, And yeah, their episode absolutely rocked my shit. I was sitting here
Mm.
a wreck after it. And like I said, there
Yeah.
was the comments, everyone was just like, girl, like I still haven't stopped crying, or I'm crying all over again with you. Um, yeah, it's beautiful to see so much positive comments, and like you said, hopefully barriers keep being pushed and representation and diversity continues to come on leaps and bounds. Because yeah,
Well, look, you watch Bill and Frank, regardless of what your sexuality is, if you can't think, I would love to be loved like that. I would love to love like that. That's if you can't watch it and have that sort of like ability, straight, gay, anywhere in between, like your problem is your own humanity.
100%. Absolutely. But yeah, so with that, we will wrap it up. I just want to say thank you to you personally, because like I said, the game, huge part of my life. The show, oh my God. Thank you for being a part of two parts of the same project, I guess, that brought me so much absolute happiness and joy. And it did kind of ruin my feelings at points, but the happiness outweighed that. And I just want to say thank you for the blood, sweat, and tears that I know that you and so many other people put into, because it is so appreciated.
No, thank you, Katie. Being a part of it has been, no question, the joy of my career. Allowing it all to build to those things, it's been profound, and I'm so grateful to, uh, you know, I'm so grateful to Neil and grateful to Craig and grateful to Naughty Dog and HBO for letting me come to the party.
I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much for sitting down and taking the time to talk to my crazy fucking head for over an hour. I do
It's my pleasure,
appreciate
Katie. Have a good afternoon.
you too. And that is it for my chat with Jeffrey. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, thank you so much to Jeffrey for sitting down, taking the time out of his day to talk and chat and tell me all those amazing stories. Oh God, I love this style of video. Yeah, I love reaction videos. I mean, it's kind of what most of you guys would know me for, I guess. But I love getting to talk to people that are such a big creative force behind the things that I love. So anytime I get an opportunity or a chance to do something like this, it just makes my week. It makes my month. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully there'll be some more videos like this popping up in the future. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you all soon.